Hello everyone and welcome to ZankCast, where we interview members of the Bay community and get to know a little bit more about them. For this ZankCast, we're going to be interviewing a WBO organizer, staff member, creator of the Shin Tornado Attack Repro, Shindog. Thanks so much for being able to come here. So just to open up, just to ask for people who are wondering a little bit about yourself, just give a little introduction.
Oh, okay. So I found the WBO maybe late 2017. My kids were watching probably the show on Disney XD at the time. And I also found some Metal Fight seasons on Amazon. So we started watching that and we started buying some Beyblades at Toys R Us. We still had Toys R Us back then. We don't anymore. But of course, the Beyblades they had were burst. I didn't really like them at the time because they burst. I had a hard time putting them together. So I bought some more Metal Fight, but they're all mid-fakes by then. And then, I bought enough of them where I felt like, well, maybe we should play with them. And then I looked. At the time, I lived close to LA. LA was pretty active. I mean, the organizers then were JoJo, Alta, and Hacking Tai, and so we went to a tournament, and that's how I got started, by taking my kids to a tournament.
That's really awesome. So I wanted to ask you, because you eventually became an organizer, so what led you to becoming an organizer to host a lot of events? And
so I've been on a few of these interviews. I always tell people, I'm very honest about it. Everything I do for myself. I don't do anything for, it's volunteer work, sure, but I do it because I have my own interest in mind. So when they were hosting these events, back then, I don't know if you remember, I'm going to take credit for this. One of the things I pushed for as soon as I became, or even before I became staff, was to allow a participant cap. That's relatively new. When I joined the WBO and before that, you could not cap any events. At that time, because LA can get really crazy, if you put up the events 2 or 3 weeks beforehand, you get like 80 people. And we couldn't handle that. My very first event had 80 people show up. There's no way to control that. So at the time, it was very hard to go to an event because the organizers were forced to post an event like with 5 days left or something. So they need to encourage people not to come. Sounds insane, but that's how you control the crowd, because you don't give enough people enough time to plan. And I had a job I worked at the time practically 6 days a week, or probably more than that, probably like 78 hours a week. I couldn't, like 5 days before, decide I'm going to take my kids to a tournament. It was impossible. Like, I need to know a month ahead. So the only way to do that at the time was to become an organizer myself, to consistently be able to take my kids to tournaments and to play myself eventually. So that's really why I became an organizer, so that I can, or my family can play.
No, I didn't even know about the participation cap thing. Wow. Yeah, that makes a lot more sense, actually. I didn't.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, to be fair, I want to explain that, the WBO it's a small organization to start. So you obviously want to be as inclusive and as open to everybody as possible. So even though it puts additional burden on the organizers, it was like, if anybody wanted to come at any time, they can come. In retrospect, if you look at it, like, wow, how can that be, right? Nobody should do things that way. But the idea, the philosophy isn't a bad one. It's just, it's not practical for people who actually run the events.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask now, because you've been an organizer longer than I have, what are some takeaways that you've learned after being an organizer for so long, that if someone who wants to join the WBO is listening right now, what are some takeaways that maybe you have after having so much experience with it? Well,
I think the community around you is really important. I think when I came through, some of the other organizers, they were all, and I'm not saying younger people can't, younger, I mean 13 or above can be good organizers, but having some adult organizers around really help. They help with equipment, transportation, is having really experienced organizers, and a lot of the organizers in LA were staff at the time, so they really knew the ins and outs. To bring you along is very helpful. Even though as of now, I'm also, right now, my current staff duty is involved with grading organizer quizzes and doing interviews. One of the less desirable outcomes in that process is that you're asked to co-host with somebody before you become a full, independent host. I mean, people take that as in kind of like, oh, I didn't get like a full pass. I didn't get an A or whatever. But that is so valuable. I think if you can do that, it's so much better. That's the one thing that I would say. If you can find somebody to co-host with, find other organizers to join up with you, even if you have to go a little further away in the beginning, it's so valuable. Because what happens is, and you'll see this on the quiz and the interviews that we do, all the questions I asked that are problems that come up in the WBO literally come up every single time at a WBO event. Like it's not even that these problems come up eventually. They will come up the next time that you host an event, even if it's your first time. It's almost 100%. So because we're not, it's not like a soccer league or baseball where all the kids come, the parents come, they read this booklet, or at least they were given one. They just come. I'm sure you've organized and you know this, that it can be chaotic, especially if the numbers get big. Mm-hmm. If it's like 15, 20 people, okay, but what if it's 40? It becomes very, very challenging for an organizer to handle that in the beginning, especially in the beginning. As you get more seasoned, it's still very good to have help. Other organizers tend to make good judges anyway, and you can never have enough judges, really. So that's my take on it. Just get help. Yeah.
That's something we definitely learned quite a bit, because to do these events, you do need to find reliable people to help you out, because it's always a team effort when you're doing it. Because if you're by yourself, it's going to be a lot tougher to manage, to get people to the stations. Sure. Yeah, no, it's just, I agree 100%. It's a lot about being prepared for these things, because these are like actual events, fan run or not. These are like legitimate.
Right.
So the next thing I wanted to ask you was about kind of your experience, because I did read a little bit of your bio trying just to look into it, but you are a TCG player, like trading card game, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it is kind of like a different kind of for competitive and how they do it, but how would you kind of compare how they do their events and how they kind of do that type of stuff to like Beyblade? Because you have a little bit of a perspective outside of just Beyblade.
Yeah, so I think the game that I played many TCGs, for about 20 years. I'm a lot older than the average person in the WBO. I played Magic almost around the time when it came out. I played that competitively till probably about 2014-ish. So that's almost a good 20 years. I played Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh! Versus. I eventually played some poker too. That's where most Magic players go eventually. Obviously, a Magic event, a Wizards event back then, or even a poker tournament, they're going to have a lot more structure. There's a lot more money behind it. There are pros. They're actually pros who people are. Poker pros maybe not so much, but they're on somebody's payroll. HASBRO or Wizards of the Coast pay people to be pros. Travels paid for and things like that. There's a lot more money behind it. The competitive aspect of it, judging, judges, event staff, not even the judges, the staff, they're set people, and to a certain degree, you can even look at WBBA events. Yeah. The judges typically don't play. The organizers don't play. That's a huge difference in the WBO. I don't want to say this in a negative way, but it is a handicap. If you're not playing, you can concentrate on event running, right? That's why you hire a wedding planner. They make a lot of money because they plan your wedding, but they're not in it. It's very helpful to not be in it. So I think that's the biggest biggest difference that I've seen from other competitive games to Beyblade. Is because we are a fan-based, kind of self-service organization. Our events, especially when they get big, they're hard to manage, and probably that's why we haven't tried to tackle like huge events all the time, because it's very difficult. I think you were at Beyblade West and you've been to some bigger events at AN and things like that. Literally, there's a call to everybody, or Baytuber Brawl, you were there. Like, there's a call to anybody that can come, please come and just work at this event. But even if they come, they have no training to run an event. Most of us don't have the training to run a large event, or to how to coordinate with one another. We don't have little walkie-talkies. We're just walking around yelling at each other. That's what we can do, and that's okay. There's fun, and there's kind of a homely feel to that, and that's okay. But it's not as professionally done, if we want to put it that way. I don't really say that in a negative way, though.
Yeah. No, I understand. It's definitely a different thing, and also, the WBO events compared to, let's say, something that's like a lot bigger. There's a lot more funding and like companies backing up sponsors. WBO, it's more likely than not it's the organizer's pocket, so it has to go well for the organizer to keep on going, so they can keep doing events. So the next thing I wanted to ask you, briefly touched on this, but the WBBA, I kind of want to get a little bit of your perspective on this. You don't have to say, oh, this, that, or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, whatever you prefer is whatever you prefer. But kind of, when you compare the WBBA to, like, the WBO for how things are done, are there some things you like more that we do here on the WBO? Do you think WBBA does some good things there? I'm a little curious.
Okay, yeah, I have pretty strong opinions about this. So I'm glad you asked. So the thing that I like the WBO the most is that, well, first of all, you don't play Beyblade competitively if you're not in the WBO. At least not right now. There's some local smaller organizations or stores or whatever you can play at, but primarily WBO, at least in the United States, and I would say Canada too, and I think that's fair to say if you're going to play competitively consistently, you're going to play in the WBO. And that's great. The biggest advantage I see the WBO having over the WBBA and many other organizations is we have these legacy formats. And I don't just mean in burst. Obviously, what I made the stadium for, you can see where my interest is at. The WBBA or the TAKARA TOMY, when they're done with a series, it's in their best interest to move on to promote the next series. They don't want you to go back and play with your single layers for another 5 years. They need you to buy whatever X or Cross is, right? They need you to buy that and play that. Even vendor run events, we do have some vendor run events in the United States and things like that. They should promote what they sell. And there's nothing wrong with that. They should do that. But because we're fan run and we pay homage to Beyblade itself, we play the classic or the vintage or whatever you want to call it events, and my most of my interest is really in that now. I prefer the older stuff. The older the better. So that is a huge plus. Now the huge plus on the WBBA side is many, not all of them, but a lot of the WBBA regions hold very large events. And they do it very quickly. They have to. They do malls or convention centers, and they get like 500 people, and they need to get done by noon or something like that. It's just insane. They start at 9. I've seen these videos of Taiwan. Taiwan is they're pretty competitive. There are a lot of players. They line up outside a mall, like down 4 blocks in the city, and then they all get in. They all get out by noon. Their rule book is just much better for that. But again, to be fair, in order to push that kind of rule book, the judges have to do a lot. Our judges do a little bit less. For a recently changed rule like the reshoot calling, their judges call reshoots. Our players call reshoots. If you think about it, the player calling their own reshoot is like playground basketball where you call your own fouls. Like that sort of works. Depends on who you have. Real basketball game, the refs call the fouls, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a difference in that. But so a lot more goes on the judges' plate. But they're dedicated judges. They don't play. They just do the judging. So the biggest advantage I think that WBO have, at least this is the point that I reach, is that we care about the vintage formats. Mm-hmm. We care about, even within burst, we still care about single, double layers, or whatever. Yeah. In the WBBA, the rules are simple. Mm-hmm. The rules are simple, and they've stayed pretty consistent through the generations. That's pretty hard to do for 15, 20 years. Yeah. To stay consistent. It's easy to pick up. It's like, if you print it out, I think it's like 3 pages. I think, smaller fonts, 3 pages. WBO can spend 3 pages on can you paint your Beyblade or something like that. So that's where I see the biggest difference between the WBBA and WBO. I tend to like those rules a little better, because I think if this organization is going to really grow, you cannot just have the ultra competitive players, that the few guys that you see on Discord or forum discussing a lot. If you want the game to get big, you have to be able to bring people in quickly. So I think I favor those type of rules. That's easy for parents and kids to understand quickly.
No, I think that's pretty fair, and it's very hard for consistency at all. It's not easy, because you have different people who believe in different things. Or maybe we should do this, we should do that. It's definitely not easy. I feel like WBBA, it's a lot easier because it's the company, so it's like, guys, okay, you do this, and then after that's it. But that's kind of what led to some things like in burst. I still don't think we know how to define a KO in the stadium. It's the biggest thing. No, I'm actually a little bit scared, because if the new generation has a shroud, we're screwed, because then after it's another 5 years of trying to figure out where does the KO go on that stadium.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. But I don't think I'm a pessimist. I'm just a realist. I think it's definitely going to have a shroud. just legal. I think once they got away with one, why wouldn't they do it? If you make every effort to look as safe as possible. Whether it's really safe or not, it's really not an issue. It's like when it shows up in court. Hey, little Johnny got his eye poked out. Yeah. Hey, we put a shroud on it. We tried. It's just one of those things where I think you do it just for the sake of legal department and not giving them a heart attack.
Yeah, because before they had the cardboard around that you would put up, but I think the shroud makes more sense logistically just to do. No, it is a good point that you make too about a lot of the legacy stuff. I think a real benefit is that regardless of what generation you're from, plastics, metal fights, burst, I think the WBO gives a really good opportunity for fans from any generation to play. And that's a very good thing, because the WBBA is just, okay, it's burst is done, okay, new thing. Metal fight was done, new thing. And also the thing is too, is that it's going through the path. So once you get to this point in burst, for events, it's okay, we're just doing the DB. I know some are different, but the DB stadium, it's only DB and BU, maybe 2 sparking. But if someone wanted to use I like the God layers, well, you can't really do it unless it's some fan run thing. So, it depends. And I like to think that hopefully, WBO can definitely grow. I think we have a lot of good potential here, because even though Beyblade's niche per se, I feel it can grow to be as good as any of these big events. That's why Konsei, who does the premiere stuff, I think he does what I would have imagined all of WBO could have been where it's these larger scale events. It's not even just one event. He'll do 4 or 5. And a lot of that is, having people, having the assets there. But I do think moving forward, I hope we can grow pretty good over the next few years.
Yeah, I do too. And I think what he's doing is incredible. That's kind of how it coincides with my vision a lot, where there is somewhat of an annual championship. We don't even have to call it the same thing every year. Maybe 1 year's annual championship is just the Baytuber Brawl. The next year is something else. But there's very distinct main event that everybody knows. We're going to get 200 people or whatever. Everybody comes together and we try to run that nicely. A lot of logistic issues. I mean, money is an issue always, and where do you put it, right? Because people come from far away and not everybody's going to fly to, Toronto or Florida or wherever, Texas, wherever to do this. But I like having that. And I think even if you don't have the biggest turnout for these world championship events, I think it's very good for an organization like this to crown somebody the winner of the year, so to speak. Does that mean they're the best blader in the world for that? Maybe. Who knows? Who cares? But I think it's just like it's fun to have that, and I almost wish instead of a leaderboard or something or ranking our rankings, you have like a room of champions or something, like a Hall of Fame for these winners of these major events. I think that would be really nice to look at. It puts a face on these players too. I think it's nice to have that. I think people would really enjoy having that. But Premier's doing a great job with that.
Yeah. I think it's a really good idea they have where if you qualify on the regionals, you represent that area. I think it's I think it's like a little step above of what we normally have. Like, the ranking is just, okay, some kid has like 1500 BR or whatever. It's like, it's okay. It's a little icon, whatever. But, to actually have it like feel yourself represented and also seeing the faces because, you never really see that. Like even the WBBA events or BBA, they always put a face on the players when you see on these big events. So I think that's a very smart thing. And also, I think it's a good idea. I mean, if we have the funding, obviously, but like you said, to have it yearly, because I think we tried to do that with like Beyblade X or whatever, but I remember that COVID hit, and then after Beyblade X is Beyblade gone, and then so we got lucky. And
technically, Beyblade X turned into Beyblade West, which you were at. Technically, it was mostly scrapped, though. I mean, it's downsized so much that I don't even don't even feel fully comfortable saying it turned into that because it was such a bigger, much more ambitious, and then turned into like a 3-day, which isn't bad, but it's not what was planned. We had plans of these, and I think I can say this now. We had plans to do qualifiers and even some stipends and things like that. But it just never came about. And just as well, because I think Beyblade West was 2019 October. Yeah. Right, I think. And then by November or December, really, there was COVID already, probably. We just maybe didn't know it. Or North America's like, nah, that's not coming over here. We're okay.
Yeah, because the scene greatly got affected. I think we took a little bit more cautious. I think, I don't know all of the US, but I think the US was hosting quite a bit during like COVID, right? Like there I saw a bit
after,
of events,
I think we were free to do stuff. I know my very last event that I planned was at an AO house, I think late February or late March. I canceled that. Because it was getting kind of restrictive. Legally, I could have done it. I think at the time, legally, I could do it. But pretty soon after that, it would not have been legal. I would not have been legally be able to do it. Certainly not indoors. Yeah. And even outdoors, I think it came down to like 4 or 9 people gathering or something like that. Yeah. And then it was like that for, I think, it's a while, maybe about a year. It's very hard. Depends on what state you're in. States are very different. But if you're going to go out there and you're going to gather 25 people or more, that wasn't too easy to do. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it really did affect us quite a bit because I feel like we were actually doing pretty good, but because COVID, everyone has to stay at home. It's like safety first and that priority. I felt really bad because I would always see these events popping up. I'm like, man, we got nothing here. And it took so long until we finally got events. No, but I think we're starting to pick up a little bit because I think now COVID, at least it's a little bit more safer now and people are starting to come. So I kind of want to move forward because I know you did kind of talk about this, but you did a pretty awesome project, and I think I did do a video on it, the Tornado Attack Repro. So if someone's, wondering about it and, you're the main person behind it, can you talk about it?
Yeah, sure. I'll give you a kind of a rundown. I think this is good because then some people that may not get mentioned a lot get credit for what they did.
Sure.
So in the beginning, and I think I made a video on this, but don't even bother going looking for it. I took 2 brand new tornado attack stadiums to an event. The event was very small. We only had like 4 people turn up.
Yeah.
But that happens with Plastics H&S.
Mm-hmm.
2 brand new. They're hard to find. They're expensive. I think they're somewhere between $200 to $400. That's what I paid.
Yeah.
In about 1 minute, I broke both of them. Oh, I didn't break them. Somebody else did. Somebody broke them. And then it's not their fault. It happens. But it was a test event. I do a lot of test events. I do test events in my own way. I just show you. I don't have to tell you. My point with that event was these stadiums are not sustainable. I love these formats. They're not sustainable. If your layer or your AR attack ring just touches the floor, the floor is probably going to have a hole in it. So you better launch that Beyblade perfectly flat every single time. Well, there's a good chance you're out $200 to $400.
Mm-hmm.
So when that happened, I showed it to the staff and I started working with Angry Face to create a stadium. We were unsuccessful for a very long time. People probably don't realize how long it took, but for most of COVID, we were working on it. Eventually, now WBO staff Dan and Think got involved with the project, but Angry Face should be credited for doing most of the designs and modifications of the designs. I really just paid the bills. I sent them 1 TA. We cut it in half so you can look at the cross sections. And Dan dealt with most of the logistics in terms of finding a manufacturer and dispensing it later on. And Think did some of the testing for it a little bit later on. So I just signed the checks. In the end, I think the product was successful. Distribution was okay, maybe not entirely the best. The way that it went, and then I want to be fully transparent because people are still asking about them. All I really asked back from the project was I asked for 80 stadiums. We were able to produce about 250, not counting prototypes. There were several failed prototypes too. I took 80 stadiums. I've been giving them away on the West Coast. I do not sell them, and I won't. Any time in the near future, I won't be selling them. The other part of the 250 went to either Dan or Think, and it's free for them to distribute however they want. That's how I compensated for their time and their efforts. Angry Face is compensated in a different way, and I don't want to talk about that. That's private. That's business. Yeah. So that's how we managed it. And the idea was we're going to be able to sell enough of them to do reruns. Yeah. It didn't really quite work out that way. I'm still working on a rerun. But one of the reasons why I was willing to sign the check and just let other people deal with it is I don't really have the time to do this. Yeah. But now I am taking a more active role in terms of getting a rerun going. I still won't be selling them. I will still give it to somebody else to sell. Yeah. But I hope we can make more. They are there's still demand for them, I think. Yeah. People still are looking for them. So I hope I can do a product. It was actually made up in Canada, but I have some of the tooling here. I'd much rather make it here because shipping that stuff from Canada to here and even paying people in Canada is actually harder than you think. American money's no good. they want wires and stuff like that. They don't trust. I guess they don't trust me. So it's hard for me to make it into a bank during banking hours. Right. So it's even hard to pay those guys. But there's a lot of, there's some small difficulties that I have to get by, but I'm working on it. And once I get it set up, I will have somebody distribute it. And my wish will always be that they be sold at an affordable price so that people can have access to them. But I also want to say, I'll just take this opportunity, not to plug the product, whether we sell it or not, I don't make any money. So it doesn't matter. You have to understand that the first run, they were sold at a total loss to me. Yeah. The pricing on them is not sustainable. It's completely not sustainable.
Yeah.
Each stadium is subsidized, including the failures, at about $100 USD. So every stadium I sold, I lost $100. That can't go forward if you want somebody to continue to distribute them. Yeah, I mean, can't people can't do that, and I'm not going to do that either. So don't get out the pitchforks and the torches. If they come out again and it's priced higher than before, it has to be done that way. If you're not happy with it, there are other stadiums that you can use.
No, 100%. I think the project was very good because I think that's something that's so important is that to get like any of these products, like a reproduction is such a good idea. I was actually surprised we never thought of it for so long because these stadiums are kind of brittle, and it's even the burst stadium, the shroud breaks or you get dents, right? These things won't last like 3, 4, or 5 years. So to have like an alternative to it, where the stadium, I think personally at least, I think it's universal for any generation to use. I think it was such a good thing, and I'm sure people are going to be happy to know eventually they can get their hands on it, because I know a lot that watch are fans of plastics, or they keep on asking me when it is, and like I had no answer. But even something like the BB10, I tried to work with Dan. That is public. I gave him my BB10, the fresh, the mold and everything. So even we're trying to do that there, and it's not an easy process too, because my BB10 had the issue where there's like that tiny little dent on the vacuuming on it, so we had to like fix it and everything. But
right.
I think the important.
I'm very excited about that, by the way, and thank you for doing that. I hope it works out. That'll be a huge.
I needed to. My BB10s are like all cracked around. I need to. But it's a really good thing because I think accessibility is really important. And I do think the WBO should be, because I don't know what goes on, whatever behind this, but I think it's a thing that we should support because it's quality of life for the game. Like eventually, maybe there's going to be a burst repro, hopefully not. But eventually, we're probably going to have to get to that point. And I feel, quality of life is such an important thing for Beyblade especially because eventually there's no way you're going to find like a real... like a Storm Pegasus, a Dragoon Storm, because eventually these things are finite. There's a finite amount that was ever made. So what you're doing is really good, and I think, I hope eventually WBO will be a little bit more open to quality of life, because I know there's like the opposing side where it's like they're not TT, but it's also like, okay, but TT's not making it anymore, so we gotta be a little bit more open. Like. I will die on the day that I have to play like on like a quad drive stadium over like the TA Repro.
Sure. And I think it's just with any collecting of classic things that you put usage on, unless it's a piece of art. Let's say if you collect cars or whatever, at some point, even cars, they just run out of parts. And the only way you're going to continue to enjoy this car is to get custom parts. Yeah. Right? Somebody has to make it for you. And does that make your car? Does that if that makes you not enjoy the car, fine. But if somebody wants to enjoy their car that way, make it accessible to them. Let them do that. Not everything in that car is original anymore. But is that so bad that people are going to stop making stuff because they're not selling it anymore? Yeah.
So something else I wanted to ask, because you basically played through all 3 generations like extensively. You've done plastics, you've done the HMS, burst, metal fights, kind of curious, how do you feel about each of these generations? I know what your preference is, but to someone who's wondering, what's your preference on each of them? What's the reason? I'm curious because everyone has always unique perspectives on what they like.
I like the older. I like plastic. Plastic, everybody will tell you because it's just so customizable. Like it's crazy, but probably also realistically, if you're bringing a younger audience into Beyblade, that's not where you want to start. Yeah. Most likely, if you sold plastic Beyblades now, it probably won't even be 6+ or 8+ because some kid's gonna put a metal ball up their nose and end up in the hospital or something. And get it suctioned out, because there has just more parts are dangerous, to younger kids. But plastic is good for that. But I think if I'm really gonna be honest, I think burst is actually good in terms of entry level. I think it's the more it's the more, I think it's more Beyblade for everybody.
Yeah.
I think I would think the next generation, whatever it is, will also go down that route where it's for a wider audience.
Yeah.
It's like even like model building, which, you know, Bandai is a huge competitor for TAKARA, TOMY, like Gundams or Gunpla. You know, they have grades on them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if the plastic is like sort of master grade or perfect grade difficulty, then the burst is more like a high grade. And but later on in burst it gets complicated too. And I think like DB's gotten a little bit too difficult for, I think, like a 6-year-old. Like I see plenty of 6-year-olds that can't change modes, like high mode to low mode. They just can't take it apart. Mm-hmm. So that's modification that you can't make. Like they can't even do it. So I see that part of it. But I think and Metalfly is somewhere in the middle. Metalfly is really good for durability and things like that. So I mean, if I say that, you know, if I play favorites, I mean, I obviously like HMS and then plastics and then metal and then burst. But it's not like I hate any kind of Beyblade. I host them all. I obviously enjoy them all. Yeah, that's probably what I would think. I think the burst direction is good to bring the game to, well, I don't want to say the masses, it's not really quite there, but bring it to more people, you know, to get more people to be able to enjoy it.
Yeah, because there's definitely that. I mean, I started collecting plastics now. I've already seen what my wallet looks like now, so I'm a little scared to go any deeper. But you know, these things have like so many parts and everything. And I've done some model kits. I think I built like at least 2 of the plastic bays, but I do definitely agree that like I do feel it's like a different era for like what the kids would be used to actually do it. Like definitely if you give like a 5-year-old, 7-year-old, they're not gonna be able to build like a Dragoon ass with all the things to take out.
Sure.
I do think you definitely did make a very good point on kind of accessibility in the way and like easy to do, because burst, it's just for the most part it's just you get it, you twist it, and then after you launch it. Metal Fight also it is kind of, I agree, kind of in between, because Metal Fight's not too complicated. For the most part, it's just you put the parts together, you just screw it together, and that's kind of it.
Right.
But, you know, since we talked about, you know, Gen 4, and I always like to leave this as the end question until we eventually get to it. For 321, for whatever it is, Gen 4, what are some things that you'd like to see them incorporate into Gen 4? It could be the stadium, launchers, bays. You know, what's kind of like your wish list that you want to see them try to do moving on?
Probably what I don't want to see
go
is I'm very afraid of all that, and if I'm calling it the wrong thing, then I apologize, and maybe you can correct me. Yeah. But I was very worried when they took away the rare Bay Get stuff, and then started doing, what is it, Bay Camp? Like where you shoot a video and there's some AR stuff to it.
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. Like
what is that stuff?
Yeah, okay. So there's the rare Bay Get battle. That was like the online thing that you click. Then after they switched it to stores where it's just like it's a store lottery for it. The app you're talking about, it was kind of like this separate thing. Yeah, it was online. It was like you get your phone and they have like the effects, whatever, like that type of stuff. Yeah.
Yes. I am very anti that. I hope the next gen's main gimmick is not that. I try to learn I'm very bad at it, but I try to learn to play Bagoma, right? I'm going backwards. I want my toys to be physical toys. I don't really want POW to come out of the base hit. Yeah, I don't want to be recording it, and I don't want to have 2 kids launch a Beyblade and then grab their phone and then look at it on their phone.
Oh, okay, I get what you mean.
Nightmare to me. Because I think, you know, we have digital games, that's fine. My kids play plenty of that. Physical games, let's keep it like this. Like, play basketball, don't play video game basketball as much. You know, that's kind of where I'm at. That's what I don't want. I'm very worried about that. Bay's not bursting, which I heard from you. I read your post about that, and I hope that's true. I never liked the burst mechanic that much. I don't hate it as much as people think I do, but I don't like it that much. I hope they don't burst. Stadium, I've already resigned to a shroud. It is what it is. I hope the bays are smaller. I like them smaller. So the burst space in the end, I think it's really big, and then once in a while you'll see a video or photo of a kid holding a Beyblade, and it's like bigger than their palm. Yeah, it's just like the whole. You can't see even any of their fingers. I think that's a little bit too big. It loses again. If I'm going back towards Bagomas are this big. You know, they're the size of
very small,
like a quarter, and they can be very powerful. You know, it doesn't really. Actually, I think when they hit and they get hit, it's more satisfying. You know, they do a little more flying, typically. So I like them to be a little smaller. I like them to be able to fit into a kid's pocket, not just my pocket. I think that's nice. I think that's a nice size for Beyblade. At maximum size, I think single dual layer is where I like it.
Right.
But of course, if they go another 7 years with it, it'll just get bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
But I hope they start a little smaller. I hope we don't get something like what is it, NATO, where it's
the NATO where it's like this weird thing. Yeah.
It's like I hope it's not the size of a pancake. And just like, but those are the things that I kind of hope for. Other than that, I hope it's not too electronic or motorized. Because that stuff just so far breaks. I probably hold the WBO record in terms of breaking hybrids and ignition. I've broken many.
I definitely never wanted to go digital at all. I think that's the death if you do it, if they go digital. Like they have the games that are separate, that's fine. But like the main game, I always wanted to be physical. I definitely agree with that. Something else I was kind of curious on, because I know plastics doesn't necessarily have this, or it's the idea of like power creep. From what I understand, they're kind of, for the most part, pretty equal to each other. But metal fights it. Metal fight, it goes like this. Burst, it goes like this.
Right.
So kind of, would you want it to be for the balancing? Like, would you prefer how they're already doing it? Like, what would you think?
Well, we could go back a little bit. Coming from a TCG background, TCG in the beginning, usually the card power level is up here because they're just starting.
Yeah.
Then they'll have to ban some of these cards and drop it because these things are just too good. Because math, the guys doing the math on this, they just, let's make this because it's really good. And they have to drop it. And then you'll see this kind of up and down where they kind of keep it consistent. But as you release cards and cards become legal, at some point, you have to make better cards or people don't buy them anymore, right? Yeah. So that's why card companies do seasons. They'll just block you out like, wow, this is, especially Magic, like this is standard, and things just shift out of the current standard. I think unless they're willing to do that, it's hard to do because you can change the design of the Beyblade and stuff like that to a certain degree. And then they're still tops. They still have to spin, there's still few shapes, triangles, hexagons, circle, whatever, squares, ovals. And then, you do 5, let's say you even get 3-5 years out of that. I mean, at some point, if you don't make them heavier or bigger, where are you going to go with it? Unless you just make them not legal and then start over again. I don't see, I know, and it's every company, they want this toy line to be evergreen. If you're really going to achieve that, I don't see how you don't reset, just like, well, starting from tomorrow, even though these bays are power levels fine, you can't use them anymore in our standard. I mean, I don't really know how else you can do that. Even paper cards have to do it. And you're talking about physical thing. They're only going to get better. We don't buy the same cars. Like, you're not going to go buy a car that was, even if it's brand new from 1996, for the same money that you would pay for the same car now. Like, you're not going to buy a Camry from 96 when you can buy a Camry from 2023, because the 23 one is just better. And if you make the same car you did in 96, no one would buy it. You can still drive it, right? You still get you to work, but why aren't you buying it? Because, well, you don't want to. You want it to be better. So unless you take it away from people, I don't really see how you're going to do it.
Yeah, I think that's the dilemma they always run into, that Metal Fight had to do it. They did the 40 slightly more complicated, 0G more complicated. I think why Burst does so well is kind of how they designed it, because I think Burst, and I don't like to rag on Burst because I think I do technically enjoy it the most, because I have like kind of a little bit of short attention span, so anything that goes fast, I'm like, all right. But the things are kind of, I feel burst in the sense is like the least longevity generation compared to the previous ones. Because in the sense, like there's teeth, right? If you're a classic player, it's like absolutely hell because your Death Scyther is not going to be the same Death Scyther after 1 or 2 events. Your teeth get shredded, it's done. So I think Hasbro had the right idea on slopes. I think slopes is actually a very good idea because slopes, you can, how do you break it down? Maybe slightly looser, but it more or less keeps the same shape.
It'll take you a long time.
Yeah. So I think what they did really well on Burst, and I hope they don't do this, is they don't try to purposely design it, because it's a smart design for them. The things break down, you have to buy 50 layers. You have to buy, my winning Valkyrie's dead. 5 more I need to get, right? I hope they don't go in the philosophy of like, not like on purpose. They're never going to say, oh, well, we didn't know, because they do care. Like at the start of Burst, they reinforced Xeno, what was it, Victory on the Wings. They do care, but like they do know what they're doing on the system design.
Yeah. Have you heard, I don't know if you've seen it, but I always, I don't really watch the show very much, but I do know some of the songs I hear in the background. So the intro to Beyblade Burst Turbo?
Yeah.
The song, I just call it Beyblade Burst Ammo because you just spend it. Like single and dual layers, literally like that. Some of the layers, that size are, for very competitive players. I think you can ask around even in Toronto. They brought 2 of them. You use one in first stage, you use one for the finals.
Yeah.
And people don't even balance tune them because balance tuning them can make it not playable.
It ruins the teeth.
It's too much. Yeah. It happens.
It even happens in the dilemma with, what's the new thing? Zyphoid. Zyphoid is like, I consider like almost the best thing in like the standard right now. But Zyphoid, I made this joke. Zyphoid, you in one battle first stage, you have to get a second copy for finals or for every match because sometimes it is part of the design and that's what happens when you have plastic. But like when it's like a triangle, eventually it's going to bend to this side. So it does get to that. But something interesting we kind of touched on a little bit, the idea of kind of bans and stuff like that. I think at the start they were kind of on top of that. They had the original, and specifically in Japan, because I know other regions they banned more specific, like Requiem, whatever. But for like the Hall of Fame, which I thought was really neat, they had like the Death Scyther, the Dark Death Scyther, and I think the last one I remember was like Garuda was on there. In terms of like banning, on the WBO perspective, how do you think bans are effectively done? Because bans are not the easiest thing to do, right? Because you have to see the sample size and what goes on. And I don't think it's some easy process. Like, I think some things make sense. Like, if a part's super hard to get, okay, maybe it makes sense to hold off until they make it accessible. But kind of, what do you think of how WBO does the banning?
Yeah, so banning is an interesting topic, and I think my general stance is to ban as little as possible. It just comes out in my discussions in the forum and Discord. But for me, it's also, first of all, it's 2 separate different categories, right? So there's the vintage or the legacy formats and the standard format, right? So let's say even for MFB, we have MFB standard and 0G, limited, and then obviously they have to have a restrict list. I don't even want to call them a ban list because it's you just can't play those because they don't fit into this. It's like F1 cars don't go to NASCAR, Like, why can't I drive my F1 car in NASCAR? Well, because you can't. That's just the rule. For the standard format, I do like the philosophy of the WBO to this point where nothing is banned. I want one of that, but I've also been very vocal in saying I wish organizers can host events to ban specific parts, which you wrote a very good forum post on, like an optional one. Now, we don't want to get too crazy with the option where, every part that starts with the letter A, it's just people going to the events will get really confused, all dashes, but not metal, but, it's a little crazy. Yeah, we don't want the body of your event description to be, like this big, which sometimes they are. But but ideally, I like one format. And here's the reason. A lot of the people that play, if you look at the kids, the parents buy their Beyblades and give it to them. You know,
Yeah.
we have two distinct groups. The WBO really, to me, is a late teen, 20-something organization made for late teen, 20-something people. The kids are welcome to come and play, but they're not really catered to. I hope that doesn't offend anybody, but I think really that's the truth of it. Yeah, because I have kids, I brought them. I as a parent, I've been on that side of it.
Yeah.
So as a parent, if I buy something and I think I'm be able to use it, I want them to be able to use it. I want every dollar of every cent of somebody that's spent on something to have a place to be used somewhere.
Right.
And standard is the best because it allows everything. Like if somebody just wants to go to an event and they want to bring their desk sizer, whatever, BDR, and go against your guilty, but they're just happy to be there, let them do it. Yeah, let them do it. So every part goes into that one format. Now the legacy formats are much more. I still don't love bands, but hey, if you want to ban some more there, that's okay.
Yeah.
In the standard, I much rather see it as an option. And then I go back to plastics, right? Plastics not ranked. I have my own issues with the ranking system, but everything is legal there. And because it's old, I really think it should be that way because at some point, everybody should just be enjoying what they have left or whatever they have left that's not broken. If they want to buy more, that's okay. You know, I understand I buy a lot of Beyblades, but if they just want to be there and be happy to be nostalgic about using these things, I don't want to restrict their ability to do it. Like, this is the base I have. I can play with this or I can't play, or for whatever reason, I want them to be able to use as many parts as possible down the line. So looking forward, burst standard, let's say burst standard 20 years from now, are we going to be banning a bunch of stuff, or are we just happy that people are playing it? You know? I hope this is 20 years from now. Maybe there isn't. Maybe it doesn't matter. But who knows?
Well, hopefully, no. I definitely can see your point of view there. I think it is fair, right? Because you do want it to be as accessible as possible. Because the harder you make it for people to go to these events, and I'm not saying but you know what I mean. Like the harder it is for like what specifically is banned. It's like not everyone's going to have specific parts. I always prefer the idea of optional unless it's like a necessity. Like RDF, okay. I think RDF has like some option in Metal Fight, like you don't have to play with, and that's fine, right? I think optional makes the most amount of sense because it's not. I don't like permabans. Like permabans, I feel it's kind of like. I always prefer the idea of optional because at the end of the day, organizers can choose. So if player doesn't want to join, and let's say I want to play with BDR, I don't have to sign up on X event, and I want to go to this event, right? Yeah. I try to see if it's as fair as possible. I think something that's good that WBO recently did, I don't remember how long ago it was, but the watch list I think was probably one of their best ideas. It's transparent to the WBO what decisions they make, or what eyes on, and also for players. Because the watch list I think we should have had since day one, like since birth, because I think that would have been very good. And it's like a two-part problem, because the first problem that we have is testing. A lot of people don't want to test. So a lot of people have like an opinion on X part, and it's like, it's a little bit tricky because it's like, well, okay, have you gone to events? Have you at least tested at home? And if we don't have that data, it makes it rough. And especially when we hit the new generation, I at least hope that, I don't care how many threads or whatever, like X release, testing thread, maybe they put a note at the end saying, hey, maybe we should keep a watch on this just in case. I think if we keep an eye on that, it's good because for the overall healthiness of the metagame, because you don't want it to be where if someone has this part and it kind of makes all the other parts like unfair. Like let's say I buy, I don't know, like let's say just Valkyrie or some stamina layer, right? And let's say someone has like some other layer, right? And it doesn't matter what I have. If that's the layer you need, you know, I don't like kind of like this. Which I mean, Japan it's kind of normal, right? It's like the creep of like parts, right? You'll see like a specific mold of hybrid for like 8,000 yen, or like a 4-star disc like 10,000, right? Yeah. So I mean, it would be ideal just to kind of have that balance. But I do really want to appreciate your time for this. I think it was very good to get a lot of your perspective on this. You have the testing channel. I can put that in the description. or you just want to put the WBO
you
site?
mean my cloud storage channel?
Yeah.
That's where I store my videos. Yeah, I mean it's really everything I do is meant for me. I don't mind sharing my testing, but it's not
Sure.
it's not in a format that's easy to digest. I think you do a very good testing channel. I think your summary at the end is very, very good. My channel is not for that. You're gonna if you want information out, you're gonna have to watch it all. Just watch like little two things spin. I don't tell you who won. Usually, I don't tell you anything. They're usually just made for me. But I appreciate if you want to put it on there. People can certainly check it out. Yeah. I do want to say that if I have a take on something, I've generally tested it. I think it's very seldom that I haven't seen it, haven't played with it myself. And I think your testing channel is really, really great. I think there's only been a few of that.
Yeah.
And I don't want to offend anybody. That's good. Testing is hard to do right. And maybe that's why I'm guilty of this. Maybe I rely on the winning combo list a little bit more than people like. But at least to me is that if you bring a combo, you believe in it, and then you think you do well with it, that counts for something. But of course, people have abused that too to get funny names on there. That has happened. But I like that too. And I do prefer video testing over like text. Yeah, that's not my thing. I tried that. I really was not a big fan. Yeah,
no, awesome. All right, if you want to find out more about Shindog, I guess the WBO. I'll link the WBO. I guess.
Yeah, WBO.
Yeah. So I sign up on the WBO for Shintie updates. I'm sure you'll post a thread eventually on the WBO if they have an announcement. And again, I want to thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks for having me.
Alrighty, that's going to be it for now. Thanks for watching and bye.
Take care.